Welcome everyone to this week's session of the Check-In with the Doctor, but it's really not a Check-In with the Doctor. It's something much bigger and much more special than that. We are celebrating the launch of the German translation of the 6 Habits of Highly Effective Sales Engineers with the two gentlemen that invested a great deal of time and effort and energy into not only doing the translation, but adding a great deal of their own advice and insights. Mr. Tim Brömme and Jan-Erik Jank. I hope, did I say that? Did I even get close?
Almost.
All right. So first of all, gentlemen, congratulations. This is a huge accomplishment. You put a lot of effort into it. And now you guys, they're also the hosts of a podcast called the Sales Excellent Podcast. And normally it's them asking their guests questions, but today they get to be the guests and the ones asking the questions. So gentlemen, allow me to invite you to properly state your name and introduce yourselves for anybody who may not know who you are.
Who's allowed to start?
I specifically left that open because I have my bet on who's going to start, but I wanted to see who was actually going to start.
Yeah, Jan will go ahead and then I will follow.
Okay.
That was my text, actually. Yeah, you win here. All right. So Jan-Erik Jank, how you would say it in Germany. I think a lot of US people would say Jan-Erik Jank, which sounds very funny. And sometimes in Teams, if you go to the voicemail, it's exactly like that, right? So Jan-Erik Jank is not available at present. So leave a message.
Yeah. So Jan-Erik Jank. Did I say that? Jan-Erik Jank. Okay.
Yeah. But let's keep Jan for now. I think that's much easier.
Jan, I can do for sure.
So yeah, I'm working for SAP, right, in a pre-sales leadership position in Germany. And at some point in my life, I met that beautiful guy below me, Mr. Tim.
I'm blushing.
You can pronounce your last name much better than I can do. And at some point, he said, why not doing a podcast? So I had absolutely no clue. I was only in audiobooks, just listening. Yeah, and then we started it, and we are close to 3-year anniversary with the podcast.
Wow, that's great, guys. That's fantastic. Congratulations. How many episodes have you done in those 3 years?
60 until today. Tomorrow will be number 61, yeah.
Excellent. I love it. So quick math, about 20 a year. That's great. And Tim, may I invite you to introduce yourself, sir?
Of course, you may, sir. Firstly, thanks for having us here on your Check-In with the Doctor. It's a privilege, and it has been a privilege also to work with you on translating this book. So thank you for that, and thank you for the invite. Funny enough, my last name most Germans can't even pronounce. So it is Tim Brömme, and every time I say it over the phone, they say Brömme, what? I didn't get it, and then they come up with funny pronunciations and funny ways to write it down. So don't worry about the last name; it's just Tim, of course. And so I'm a sales engineer, individual contributor at Seismic. I joined the company in the beginning of the year. I work alongside with a great team, which I have a long history with. In fact, I met all of the guys that I'm working with together when I met Jan about like 4 or 5 years ago. So yeah. That's what I'm currently doing.
Excellent. Well, congratulations, guys. And I'm inspired to take a quick look at the book online to see how it's doing. Can we do that just for a moment?
Please go
Absolutely.
ahead.
All right. So let's bring this up and take a look. So this is the book on Amazon. And guys, do me a favor and pronounce the name of the book the way it should be pronounced. One of you two.
Die 6 Wege zum effektiven Sales Engineer.
Now, somebody asked me why, in fact, I think my wife asked me, why did they not translate sales engineer? Why did you leave the English version of sales engineer in the title?
Big question. Role names and terminology. But to be frank, I think the tech space is very much influenced by American culture, and a lot of German companies are even just labeling that role sales engineer. You also have there's a very straight German translation, Vertriebsingenieur, but no one is using it. Really, no one. So at least not in the tech and software space, people are not using it. I have read it before, but again, not in our software tech space. So we decided to keep it because most people will be able to identify with it.
Yeah. So in a nutshell, it just makes sense.
It just makes sense.
to leave it sales engineer, yeah.
And that's a classic sales engineer response. So, well, guys, I'll refresh the page just to make sure we're getting the current up-to-date look. But it appears as though you've actually hit the #1 best-selling new release spot in, it looks like an IT for engineers category. Am I reading that correctly?
Yep, that's spot on.
Excellent. Well, congratulations. And at the moment, it looks like the book is #2. I'm assuming that am I pronouncing Verkauf? Is that how you pronounce that?
Yeah, that's Verkauf. That's general sales. So all books that are sort of tagged to be of sales content.
Yeah,
that is that category, which is obviously much broader. But yeah.
Excellent. Well, you're in the #2 position there. So anybody who might be listening, we want to encourage you and welcome you to pick up a copy. It's available for 99 cents on Kindle today only. And guys, congratulations on that accomplishment. It really is a huge accomplishment. I want to take us all back to the first day that you and I and the three of us began this conversation. And I floated out the idea of considering working on a German translation, and you all responded pretty quickly. Take us back to that, and what was your reason behind deciding to take on this project, guys?
I think, Jan, you should start, because you told that story recently in German, I think somewhere, and then I'll pick up on it.
Seriously? So I was like, you should start, because you have been so amazed by that idea. So first of all, so without joking, right? So we have been connected to you, Chris, by James Kakis. So
yeah.
And that is just the power of the community, right? So Presets Collective really helped the three of us to get together. And initially, James said, you should meet Chris and he would be a great guest on your podcast, right? And we did that. So we had a conversation with you about the 6 habits. And then out of the blue, you said, hey guys, why not creating a German version, right? And I mean, I'm still, and I posted it on LinkedIn today as well. So I'm still thankful that you asked us. And then we did that project all together. And by today, I'm also proud because we really did it. It's really on. People can buy it. So initially, it was like, wow, Chris White is asking us doing that project together with him. So we have been, I would say, on fire from the very beginning. I think I realized a little bit earlier than Tim that it will be a whole lot of work. But yeah, it was worth it. So,
and incidentally, guys, Michael Forbes chimed in and just did a shout out for the PSC, and so Michael, first, it's good to see you, and I thank you for joining. And incidentally, if we have anybody else who happens to be on, we don't have eyeballs on who's with us, so if you are there, you care to say hello and or ask Tim or Jan any questions, I invite you to do so. But I think we should double down on the PSC. To your point, Jan, it was James who introduced us, and in their early days, and that I think is the magic of the pre-sales community, that we're always connecting and collaborating and working together in that way. Tim, as you reflect back on those days, it sounds like Jan was sort of, aware of the potential heavy lift, as I like to say, that this project was. What was sort of your journey, certainly early on, when you considered taking on this project?
So even before we considered talking about the translation and doing this project, Jan and I had countless discussions on language because obviously we were both based in, or still are obviously based in Germany. We speak to clients that are mostly German, but still our terminology is so heavily influenced by the software that we're using, by the companies we're working for, which is predominantly US. And therefore, you sort of fall into a habit of speaking a lot of, as we call it, Denglish, which is like you mix German and English together. And I sometimes think you make it yourself a bit too easy if you mix it like that. We have a German language. There's plenty of good German words describing things very accurately. And so why not use it? So why do I have to say opportunity when I'm talking about a CRM object when there is an appropriate German word for it? And these discussions happened already way before we started with the book project. And I always found it quite interesting to find, okay, well, in the end, it's all obviously about the customer, right? We want to talk in a way that the customer can understand what we're talking about. If they feel more comfortable if I say opportunity as opposed to the German equivalent, then by all means, right? So the language topic has been on mine for a long time, and I always find it interesting to talk about it because it's also a matter of just having the consciousness around it. There's no right or wrong necessarily, but just thinking about it will make your language more effective. So then, of course, if you have now a whole book to translate, there will be many discussions, which we did have for sure. But for me, that was also it was a challenge that was interesting to me, that I felt like I wanted to take, and I also felt that Jan was a great partner to do it with because we had those discussions before.
Yeah. And did you find that as a result of doing the translation, it's actually changed the way that you now communicate with prospects and customers and colleagues?
Yeah, I mean, I would say so. I think it has sharpened that consciousness even further because now we have undergone so many of these discussions. In fact, there was one time, we always worked, and maybe we're going to get into this later, but the way we worked was like we always did concentrated work from Friday morning to Sunday evening. So 3 days back to back, sitting there. And on Monday morning, when I would wake up, I would notice that my head was in a completely different mind state from all the translation work I would be doing opposed to what I would typically do on a weekend.
Yeah.
So it definitely had an impact on the way of thinking, and there will be consequences going forward for sure in the way we talk.
And do you think the book will help other German-speaking sales engineers and pre-sales professionals better communicate in their jobs?
I think so for sure. If we didn't think that would be the case, then I think we would not have done the translation. Yeah. Communicating these concepts that you have created in the book, there's always going to be, to some extent, a language barrier. Whether if you are a native German speaker, and even though you speak very fluently English, there always will be gaps that will make it different to a native speaker. And somewhere along that spectrum, from early beginner of learning the English language up to I've lived 10 years in the US, there always will be a gap. And having the book in German will close that gap and will make those concepts more accessible for everyone.
Yeah. Jan, what did you find to be some of the more challenging aspects of the project itself?
So in general, working with Tim, of course.
It's always painful. That's what my AEs tell me. Maybe I should read chapter 1 again.
Yeah, no, I'm kidding. So I think the most challenging aspect, and that was coming up, I would say, over time, was really getting aligned on the wording and the meaning of different areas. Because so we split it up, the work, right? So we said, hey, I take these chapters and you take the other chapters. And then at some point you need to align because you come across like specific words or phrases or something. And then we have always been, it was always a very intensive dialogue, I would say. So what should we do with it, right? So if, for example, so of course we translated it, and then you come to the point where you are talking about home runs, right? In the US, that works amazing because baseball is like a national sport. In Germany, not so much, right? So there was a need to find some different analogies. And so we aligned on these, for example, to make it as consistent as possible. And I think kind of that constant dialogue was like the most intensive aspect for myself, because there is so much potential in it, right? And we said, hey, we need to get this right. Otherwise, it wouldn't be good. So we had, I would say, long dialogues and also long discussions about that, and like the wording in general, right? So you, for every habit, you have the same first letter, right? So it's always the same letter. So we tried that in German, and it's clearly impossible to do that. And you will see if you go to discovery, right? So we call it discovery, which is not a German word at all, but where we said, okay, this is so common sense in our B2B software sales area that people are used to it. So there is no need to establish whatever kind of German word. And in other habits, we said, hey, it totally makes sense to use a German word to also drive that into a specific direction.
Interesting. Incidentally, what was the translation that you decided on in the home? You know, when I say hit the home run, did you just explain what was meant there, or did you come up with your own analogy to use, like score the winning goal or something like that?
Yeah, so on this one specifically, we discussed a couple of times, and I was hoping that we could find sort of like a soccer metaphor, because obviously for us that's the national sport. However, the way you used home run in those specific sentences, the meaning was so spot on that finding a soccer metaphor would have diluted the accuracy of it.
Yeah.
So I think in that particular instance, we actually chose a general way to describe what you meant there, as opposed to finding a soccer metaphor. But that was a lengthier discussion.
Yeah.
It was,
guys. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Jan.
No, it was a longer discussion, but that was also like the fun part, right? So we have been really into that project, and we made it like our own thing. I mean, our names are on it at the end of the day, so people will judge us for the quality. So yeah, we spent a lot of time just discussing, are we going this way or that way? And also for us, I think that was like really, really beneficial. And you asked earlier about the communication, right? So I think, like, having read the book, like the sensitivity goes up, right? So I think somewhere last year, I had a conversation with a person who was looking for a pre-sales leader, right? Pre-sales manager position. And we have been talking for 10, 12 minutes. And then the person said, you know what? Our onboarding is amazing. People starting. And after 2 weeks, they're already calling prospects.
Interesting.
And I was like, calling prospects? What do you mean, right? And at the end of the day, that guy was talking about a position in inside sales.
Yeah,
right?
like a BDR type of role.
Exactly. And I was like, so we're talking about a pre-sales position, how we perceive the word pre-sales. So that was like an interesting discussion to me. And we also have been on a German podcast discussing like all these different titles and jobs on the market. And I think it's very, very helpful to be curious about it, but also to be sensitive about it. So Tim, for example, mentioned opportunity, right? So some of our prospects, they would never say opportunity, or they would never even say the German word for it. They would say, hey, we having projects. So this is where we're making our money. So going into discovery, so listen carefully and really understanding what their words are, I think is part of the book. And I think for us, that was one of, the most important parts, right? Because I think there is sometimes a huge gap when it comes to listening.
Well said. Incidentally, guys, allow me to pause just for a moment. For anybody who may have joined us in just the past 5 or 10 minutes, I'm speaking to Jan-Erik Jank and Tim, is it Brömme?
Yes, spot on.
All right. So, and they are the co-authors of the German version of the 6 Habits that was launched today. They're also the hosts of the Sales Excellence podcast, and both hail from Germany. And today is the official launch, so we invite everyone to get a copy of the book and it's on Amazon.com as well, right? It's available in Europe and here in America.
Yes.
Jan, you mentioned the importance of discovery and the importance of listening. And Tim, I'll bring it back to you for a moment. I know both of you were, I think, what's the right word? I think both of you very quickly aligned with and grasped onto the framework. And I think both the simplicity, yet the value of the framework. As you reflect on the 6 habits, is there one in particular that really resonates with you, Tim, and that you see as sort of, one of the more important ones to focus on?
So I think the answer to that one is going to be very specific to every individual potentially reading the book. I think for me, the last one, perfection, right now is the one that I sort of try to keep in mind the most, because you still get into that state where I don't know, I'm sure everyone who's potentially listening in, and maybe even the two of you have also seen this. I don't know, you prepare for a customer meeting, you put up a PowerPoint slide, and then you start putting things together. And in theory, it will never be perfect, right? You can spend literally 10th of hours on a PowerPoint slide until it looks just the way you have imagined it. But what's really the value of it, right? So you're spending too much time on it, and it will never be perfect. And I think the realization, which is also like Pareto principle, right? How much effort does how much result yield, and keeping that in balance, but having that realization that you will never be perfect. There will always be something to work on. And to be honest, every single day working as an individual contributor, I notice that when I'm engaging with our prospects, when I'm speaking to my AEs, there's never the ideal and perfect world. And it's something that we actually hear a lot, where people approach us and say, yeah, that's the ideal world you're talking about there. This is the perfect world, but reality is different. We know that, of course. But if we don't have a picture to strive towards, then we're just floating around, right? Yeah. And therefore, the perfection one is the one I currently identify the most with. If you would ask that question 5 years ago, I would have probably said discovery.
Interesting.
So I think it's also changing over time.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. And that's actually an interesting insight. As it turns out, I've actually run 2 workshops today already, if you can believe that. I have a client who has a number of teams in Europe. So I had 2 very early workshops.
Early morning.
Today, yes. And I actually had a similar comment from one of the sales leaders. He said that I think that arguably the most important thing is the post-meeting, post-engagement debrief between sales and sales engineers, so that we are always learning and improving and developing our craft. And that's why I'm very quick to say, perfect, it's a verb, not a noun.
Yeah.
Right? It's a verb. We should be constantly perfecting our craft. Jan, how about for you? What was there, or is there one habit in particular? And to Tim's point, it may change, right? Depending on sort of where we are in our journey. Is there one in particular that really resonates with you right now?
So I love them all, of course. But so for me, I would really say partnership in combination with train and perfection. Because so I can totally resonate what Tim said. And for me, like the basis you need is like a good working environment, right? And partnership is key for that. So common understanding between sales and pre-sales and maybe customer success and the implementation people, the partners, whatever, and being aligned and on eye level and like working into the same direction, and really realizing, hey, we're all sitting in the same boat, right? As you also describe it, and I always ask that question to people who are joining my team, for example, and maybe coming from customer success or implementation. Did you realize that you will work in sales? So I think that kind of understanding and also supporting that from a leadership perspective and creating, just a nice and good and positive and constructive environment is a good basis, right? Because there will be discussions all the time. There will be different opinions, but then you need to have something where you can connect to in general. So partnership for me, absolutely the basis, and that in combination with train together and perfect together, because there should be a lot of constructive feedback involved, right? So beyond well done and all these things. So I would say these three in combination are, just the most interesting to me at the moment.
Yeah. Well, and I'm asked on the regular, which of the 6 habits do I think, in fact, I get it's typically a 2-part question. Which one do I think is the most important? Which do I think is the most difficult? And I do tend to go to the habit number 1 as the most important, because I believe that all the other habits build upon that foundation of the partnership. In terms of which is most difficult, similar to what you were saying, Tim, it sort of depends. Honestly, I think a lot of times the most difficult is habit number 5, because the reality is when we give or deliver the demonstration, the one thing we need to focus on most is not the demonstration, right? And not the product. It's the customer. But we tend to focus so much like sort of naturally, right? Now, guys, there's another question I'd like to ask you, because it's a question that I get on the regular, and I'm interested to get your perspective. And that is, I've had a number of people say to me, it seems like, first of all, it seems like a very basic, fundamental framework. And it seems like it would be very good for either people who are new to the role, or maybe not in the role, but are thinking about making a jump into sales. But what's the value of the book to somebody who's been in pre-sales for maybe 5, 10, 15 years? Is there some value to somebody who is very experienced? Now, I have an opinion, and I'm leading the witness a little bit, but what do you all, how would you, either or both of you, respond to that question?
Can I start?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay, so I'm ready for it. I like that question. So first of all, I mean, Tim and I, we are also very experienced, right? So we're working in that space for 10 years or over 10 years. We have seen different companies in different countries. But by the way, but part of what we believe in is really there's still something to learn. So you shouldn't stop learning. You shouldn't stop being curious, right? And I think if you are very experienced in what you're doing, the book is great to reflect on yourself, right? So maybe you don't learn anything new from a technical perspective, or from like your toolbox is already there. But I think you will realize, okay, so that is an interesting aspect. And if I look back for 3-4 months, have I really done that? I mean, I knew it, right? But have I really done it? So I think it's really, really good to reflect. I mean, that was my experience, by the way. So reading the book, there was a lot of reflection, right? Even if you say, so this is like basic stuff or maybe simple stuff, at the end of the day, it's not simple, because knowing it is easy, because you just need to read through it, but put it into action and really stick to it every single day, every single meeting. I think this is the tricky part. So reflection and kind of little self-assessment, and maybe putting yourself into another pace, or like, hey, this is a cool trigger. I should definitely figure out a little bit more the partnership aspect for the next couple of weeks. So that would be my response your question.
Yeah, I think that's excellent. Tim, did you have a thought?
I do. And maybe it's a bit of a harsh statement, but I'm going to use myself as an example to make the point. I would say experience does not equal ability. So I've worked for close to 7 years at one company after coming from university, and it was a company that is very technology driven and very product driven. At least that was the case when I worked there. I can't now make a statement anymore because some years have passed. And now I was then there brought into a role where I was supposed to sell software solutions, but the environment was still very much prone to sell products based on features and based on price, to be frank. That was how they did business. And the assumption was this is going to work for the software product as well. And so a couple of years went in for me working in that environment, and I did what my environment told me what I'm supposed to do, right? And I did this for a couple of years. So only then to realize after I decided, okay, I need to move on, I want to go somewhere else, where sort of the world opened up. But by that time, my career was already 7 years in, or close to 7 years in. And all of a sudden, I had all of these light bulb moments thinking, geez, what have I done for the past X years? So hence, I'm saying ability and experience does not necessarily go along with each other. And a book can, whether you've worked for 2 years in a role or whether you've worked 20 years in a role, coming to the point Jan made, there's always something to be learned.
Yeah. Well, and to get back to Jan's point as well, Jan, I agree. It's one thing to know what to do. It's another thing to do what we know, right? Yeah. And I think the longer we're in a role, the easier it becomes, and hence the more we become complacent, and the more we tend to forget all of the things, or at least some of the things that made us successful to begin with. Incidentally, Michael Forbes chimes in, the reason they are called habits. It takes a lot of discipline and devotion to get things right. And you couldn't agree more, Michael. I've had a number of very senior pre-sales and SEs read the book and reach out to me after the fact to say, honestly, Chris, virtually everything you wrote resonated with me, and I've done many of those things. But first of all, I realized that I'm not doing some of the things I used to do. But more importantly, they said, you helped me put my tools in the toolbox in a more organized fashion. You helped me organize the tools in the toolbox. And to me, that's an important part of what this is. It gives us a framework for communication, right? It gives us a framework for how we not only execute within the context of our job, but in many cases, speak to our sales counterparts, which leads to my next question. And again, it's another question that I've heard a number of times. Clearly, the name of the book is The 6 Habits of Highly Effective Sales Engineers, or the German version, which I'm not even going to attempt, which ends in sales engineers. What's the value for our sales counterparts? And is there a value in reading this book for those who sell software for a living and aren't necessarily responsible for the technical win, but they depend on sales engineers to help them close business? Is there value to them, in your opinion?
So I'll go first, and it's a clear yes. Yeah, I mean, we are all being measured as part of how much revenue came in at the end of the day, whether we are having a direct quota or whether we have a team quota. In the end, it's about being successful as a company, making good business, and closing those deals, right? And we share that responsibility. So with that basis, which is the truth, outside taking that as a basis, of course, that means, of course, then there is merit for both parties, because it needs to work in conjunction, right? We need to work together with sales, and therefore, obviously, a lot of the things that are being said in the book would be valuable to salespeople as well, in my opinion. And I mean, not for fun. The first habit is called partnership, right? So, where basically sales there's a whole dedicated chapter on the topic. And I mean, as you just said, right? Of course, we are sort of responsible for the technical win. But then the question becomes, how do you even measure that? Most of the time, you can't even say, okay, now we have the technical win. It's always a fluid process. And since for closing a deal, getting that technical buy-in of whoever stakeholders we engage with from more the pre-sale side, we need it still to close the deal. So it's just logical that, of course, sales and pre-sales would both benefit from what we have outlaid there, or what you have.
Jan, what do you think? What's from your vantage point? What's the value to sales of reading this book?
So first of all, I also need to say yes. There's absolutely value for sales. So I think it's first of all getting a good understanding what kind of challenges as a pre-sales you have, and like just walking in the shoes of the other role or the other person. And get a little bit closer, right? And I mean, you describe it the other way around for us as pre-sales people. So go to your AE and ask them, hey, what the hell you're doing the whole day, right? So what are all these things you need to take care of to really bring the deal over the line? There's a lot of stuff you potentially don't see, especially if you maybe a new starter or something. So you maybe just see them sitting around in a meeting, right? Not saying a lot, just making an introduction. But at the same time, I mean, they are responsible. They're sitting in the forecast call, right? They need to get the contract done. They need to deal with legal and so on and so on. So I think both roles are really, really challenging. And a lot of things we need to take into consideration, right? So from that point of view, I think a salesperson would get like a good perspective on the pre-sales role and maybe some ideas to get easier into that conversation and alignment. And maybe also finding some like interesting points to discuss, right? And I think technical win is one of these points, right? So I personally, I like the idea of the technical win, but at the same time, we can't stop there because let's assume, hey, there is a deal, whatever, $2 million, right? And hey, we have the technical win. But what have we got at that point? Nothing, right? So, and I think this is also like a perspective we need to take as pre-sales. Yeah, this is an important milestone if we look at close plans or customer buyer's journey or whatever. But we are not done, right? So there's still some way to go. And maybe at that point, the AE becomes more important because they need to negotiate, they need to have the right timing, they need to take care of the references or whatever it is. And you as a pre-sales engineer, you shouldn't stop there, right? So it's not like, hey, technical win, check mark, and then you can go home and sleep or have a barbecue. So you still need to be dedicated to the deal. Maybe we need to have another call about architecture or whatever. And from my perspective, also, we should all think about from ourselves, hey, what else could I do, right? Beyond like the normal job. So yeah, I mean, so many interesting points. And to your previous comment and to what Michael wrote into the chat, I couldn't agree more. I think, so what I miss from time to time is a little bit more humbleness, I would say. So I meet a lot of people telling me, oh, I know that, right? I know this, I know that, I know it, I know everything, right? And I'm always like, okay, knowing it is not being able to do it really.
Yeah.
And it's maybe sometimes also a little bit arrogant because that would also mean, okay, there's nothing new you can explore. And for me, it's always limiting yourself, right?
Yeah.
So I like that comment, and I totally agree. It takes a lot of discipline and devotion. And for me, also humbleness to sometimes say, okay, I do a step back, I look at it, and then I just kind of rearrange myself. And I'm also be honest to myself, right? So maybe whatever, streamlining the discovery, I'm not perfect with already, but this is good to realize because then I can put a plan in place to improve whatever it is, right? Yeah. And I think this is maybe also a cultural issue, that it's kind of not okay I want to say, to share that, right? So I am not really good with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Who can help? Whatever. And I think we should do that more and more and more. Hey, I did this mistake, right?
Yep.
And this is what I learned from it. So I think and this is back related to partnership from my perspective, and totally off topic to your question. Sorry for that.
That's quite okay.
I think it's important because it's mindset, and this is where the book starts with, right? Purely mindset. And for me, this is just a crucial part because it makes life so much easier. And stress level, especially for pre-sales, goes down if you come into an environment where you are allowed and welcome to do that, right?
Yeah. Self-awareness is a very powerful thing, no doubt. Well, and if I may, getting, sort of closing the conversation on why should sales professionals consider reading this book, it's an example of what good looks like, right? And it will communicate to sales. And there's a lot of sales professionals and sales leaders who struggle to coach and advise their sales engineers because they don't necessarily understand them. They don't know how to motivate them. And this book will provide that guidance. Here's some of the words to use, right? If you're trying to coach your sales engineer. So I think there's a great deal of value there. We actually have a question from Michael. And again, Michael, I appreciate you chiming in. What advice would you gentlemen give to an AE who doesn't have an SE and is their own SE, as well as support for the rest of the team? I'm trying to look for SE roles. So do you either of you have any experience either working with or as a really someone from the sounds of it who is responsible for sort of both sides of the equation?
So personally, I don't have any experience in having both titles, but I do have to remember that we did actually 2 podcast episodes, one with Max and one with Ramsey, which I'm sure maybe you even both know.
Oh, yeah.
And they have been in those hybrid roles. So for an in-depth answer, I could definitely recommend having a listen to those 2 conversations. It's the first thing comes to mind. I don't know, maybe Jan, if you want to add to that.
Now, that was also my first intention, because I have never been in such a role. I have seen a lot of AEs who leverage their technical skills and their curiosity for the software and made use of it in the sales cycle, but it was not really a hybrid role. So definitely Ramsey would my number one to talk to, because I think he is managing it very, very good. And I really believe he would be open for a conversation. And as Tim said, there have been podcast episodes. One thing I really remember is, depending on who you are dealing with on the customer side, you maybe need to switch your hats, right?
Exactly.
So as the SE, you're a lot of collaboration, and you try to solve their issues and giving them everything they need. But if it then comes to negotiation of pricing or something, you need to put your AE hat on, and it can be intensive, right? Yeah. Especially if it comes to the price. So I don't think it's an easy role, but I would highly recommend to talk to Ramsey on that one.
Yeah, and balance is the thought that comes to mind. I mean, in my stage of my career, now being an entrepreneur, running my own sales training business, I in essence am wearing I'm wearing the marketing hat, the sales hat, and still the technical delivery hat. And I can say without a moment's hesitation that understanding the situation, the people that I'm speaking to and dealing with, right, and being very intentional about our approach, the words we use, and very self-aware is very, very critical. So I think those are some good observations. By the way, we have another gentleman, Raja, and Raja, I'm not going to attempt the full name or the last name, but I appreciate you joining in and saying hello. And yes, humility and honesty are really foundations. Guys, we're going to wrap up here in a minute. We've been going about 45 minutes, and I really appreciate your time. I have probably one more question for you. I've been kicking around the idea in my mind of sort of establishing a concept of 6 Habits Certified for individuals maybe who have read the book, gone through the training, and have that sort of as a, some sort of certification, if you will. My question for you is, if I were to say to you or ask you, what do you think it might mean to be 6 Habits Certified? What does that say or indicate to you?
So can I start?
Yeah, please go ahead.
So I mean, I said it earlier, right? So knowing is not being able to do it, right? So, and if I think about certification, most of the time what I see, you need to do some kind of test, multiple choice or typing answers or something, which is for me not really appropriate, right? So I would say to someone, hey, you really know it and you're certified on the 6 habits. If I would have seen it in action, right? Mm-hmm. Which would make it maybe really, really complicated for you as the owner of the framework to certify someone, right? But at the same time, the quality of the certificate would really, really go up. So that's my take on it. I mean, I would say, an issue in general with certifications. but yeah, that's my response.
No, I really like that. And here's what I'm hearing. What I'm hearing is that label or that quote certification, it's based not more on what you know, but what you've quote demonstrated in the context of your role. So I like that. Tim, in that, with that being said, what might it mean to you, Tim?
I think I can only second it. And since you mentioned it, I think there's some certifications out there which already do that today. I think if you, for example, do like a project management certification or whatever, it's not just a multiple choice test or where you have to answer questions in writing or whatever. You actually have to accumulate experience in projects over time, and you have to sort of prove that you've done them. I'm not sure if anyone from the certification gremium, so to say, sits in with these projects, which, to be honest, I think something like that would need to have happened. To Jan's point, in this case, just observing how someone does discovery. How are they really stepping into the customer's shoes? How are they addressing questions? How do they pitch when the time comes to pitch? I think that's something that that just needs to be seen, or maybe as a recording or something, to carry the value that you probably wanted to convey when actually someone says, I am certified, right?
Well, and it's sorry, just one last thought. It's maybe also the question, what would you like to illustrate with that certificate? And maybe balance also here is like a good guiding word, right? Or good guiding principle. Maybe you say, hey, if I can make sure that that person really spent time with it and the concepts and show an understanding of it, it's already like a good level of being certified, maybe L1, right? Mm. And if you want to go deeper, there will be an L2 at some point where we can really put it into practice. So stuff like that. But yeah.
Well, and an interesting little side project that we may take on at some point is, what are the traits that one would have to demonstrate consistently in order to claim 6 habits certified? So that may be something that may be sort of a follow-on conversation. And incidentally, Jan, a moment ago, you said something to the effect of me as the owner of the framework, and I have to address that and say, I sincerely believe that I'm not the owner of the framework. I sincerely believe that this framework is owned by our profession. I took some ideas and turned it into a framework and put some fancy words to it, or maybe not so fancy words to it. But I believe it's just truth. I believe that's why it resonates with people, because it's universal truth to our profession. And I sincerely believe and I sincerely hope that the profession really adopts this framework as the property of the profession, if that makes sense. Does that resonate with you guys?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, absolutely.
So guys, one last question for me. You all actually, you both actually added some additional material and content. And there was one thing in particular that I know you guys added. Do you mind just sharing, taking just one final minute and sharing sort of some of the material or concepts that you guys added to the original work from me?
So by the movement of your hand, I'm thinking you're talking about potentially the layers of discovery. Is that what you were? Potentially. All right. So then let me take this one. And to be very frank, I can't take full credit of it because it's something that I learned, I don't know, 7 years ago in a solution sales training, where they talked about this, and I thought it was a fantastic concept that I ever since now embracing and conveying whenever I can. So it's basically saying, okay, there's different layers of discovery, right? And it's actually quite close in line with, which maybe some of the technical guys listening into this have heard of, the ISO layer model, where you have at the very end have the physical medium connecting electronic current from A to B, and then you have like an abstraction layer on top of that where you talk about, okay, now this is where the hardware resides, then on top this is where the software is, and this is where the server, and this is where the actual, and so on, right? So, and this is sort of the same point here. When you engage with clients, there's obviously multiple stakeholders, and these different stakeholders will fly on different types of levels. You will speak with people that are operationally involved using your software. They are operationally involved in running the processes, and maybe they're operationally involved in actually making sure that the integration is working. And this is sort of the lowest sounds. I don't want to judge the level on it. It's just the level, the base level, right? The operational level, the sort of the physical level, if you want to draw the comparison to the ISO layer. And then you step up, right? On top of that, there's maybe the processes. And on top of that is the systems and the organization. And if you go up the ladder, so to say, at the very end is actually the customer of your customer, the competitors of your customer, and you sort of close that entire loop from the operational layer down to up to whatever to the market layer and everything in between. And only if you really understand all of these levels, then you can truly step into the shoes of your customer. Like, how can you argue that your customer should use your solution if you don't even understand the business model that your customer is using, or if you don't understand the products? Because you have to put it in that context, especially in regards to stakeholders that have C-level executive decision-making power, right? Because they only want to buy from someone who they believe understands them. So you need to articulate that and put it into your pitch, the way you frame your solution, and that is the different layers of discovery.
Yeah, that's fantastic, and such a great addition to the work that I've done. So fantastic. Jan, did you have anything to contribute to that question before we wrap things up?
Absolutely, and I can take full credit for it. No, I mean, you're just realizing, so Tim is here for like the fancy, heavy, deep stuff, right? Like the layers. And I then said, okay, so I have a checklist available. We could also add into the book, and that one is, I would say, specifically for meeting preparation. And if you look at it, you will say, oh yeah, that's simple, I know it. And of course they know it, right? But are they doing it? Or following it all the time? And it's a simple snippet, simple piece of information or knowledge. But I think the concept of checklists is quite nice because it will help you to automate these kind of steps. And there's a good reason why people who are working as pilots, right, using a lot of these checklists, right? Because they would like, and here's the point, they would like to focus on bringing these people alive to the destination, right? So thanks God in pre-sales and sales, no one is dying if we don't win the deal. But following that concept of checklist and making sure for yourself that you can tick the boxes and I have that HDMI cable with me, I have a nice camera, nice lighting, whatever, just helps you to focus on the relevant stuff, right? So a lot of people may say, checklists, why should I use that? So here is why. And there are a couple of other things. So explore the book and find out.
Fantastic.
But now you have to give credit to your pilot analogy, Jan.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. So
Marco. To Marco. Yeah,
Marco.
He talked about that also in one of the shows.
You're right. He's a great guy, and he wrote also a book in Germany. And there was an analogy to all these pilots and airplane industry and whatsoever. And he made like a connection between sales and riding an airplane, if you will. And that checklist concept was one of it. And it totally makes sense, right? It totally makes sense. So there's also an episode on our show in German, of course. But if you are interested, if your sales organization is able to land an Airbus, then you should potentially listen to that episode.
Fantastic. Well, guys, it's been such a pleasure to work with you. First of all, thank you for taking on this project. I'm honored and delighted and flattered that you guys were open to and willing to take on such a project. You've invested so much time and effort. And congratulations on not only a great translation and what I'll call elaboration of the book, but also the marketing that you've done and, releasing a #1 bestseller on Amazon, which of course we'll continue to watch. Any closing thoughts or comments from either one of you?
Big thank you to you, Chris, for considering us for this project. It has been a lot of fun. I'm extremely grateful for everyone who has already bought the book. I've received a couple of messages already and saying, hey, here's a screenshot, Tim, look at this. Makes me super happy and proud. So thanks for exposing us to that opportunity, Chris.
Fantastic. And Jan?
So first of all, I would like to... I thought that's a unique opportunity. LinkedIn Live, first time, and the dog can be part of it.
Now tell the story of this dog.
Yeah, so he just finished with the book. So he said, "Hey Jan, I'm done. Can I? What's next?"
He knew it already. He knew already everything.
And I said, "Yeah, jump on. We have a LinkedIn Live." So no, I'm kidding. I mean, I can just add to what Tim said. I'm totally thankful for that opportunity. Great experience, a lot of great learnings. I really enjoyed the teamwork and the positivity, and that it was really about bringing that new asset to the folks here in Germany. So I couldn't be happier than I am at the moment. And yeah, I'm really, really curious what you have in mind as a next possible project, as you already teased a little bit. So let's talk about that, and let's see where all this goes in the future.
Habit number 6, right? We have to continue to press and grow and perfect our craft. So, well, guys, thank you so much. And anybody who hung around, I know we went a full hour here. But anybody who did join us or anybody who may have caught us during the recording, thank you so much for joining us. If you haven't already, please, I invite you to consider picking up a copy on your Amazon platform of choice. And of course, be sure to check out Tim and Jan on their fantastic sales podcast. So guys, again, congratulations. If it wasn't noon on the eastern coast of the United States, I'd be popping open a bottle of champagne and toasting with you. But I actually have a little bit more work to do. So I'm going to invite you guys to go pop the champagne and celebrate today's launch. So thank you so much, guys. Congratulations.
Thank you so much, Chris.
Thanks, Chris.
Cheers, guys. Bye-bye.
Cheerio. Bye-bye. Bye.